All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Egg Harbor Library's book club Between the Pages. And we will be discussing The Vanishing Half. And it looks like we did a good job selecting books because this book sold out at Amazon. And then there was a bidding war between 18 different companies to get the rights to it. HBO won, and this will become a limited series. So we're picking some good ones, but that was hard to get a hold of. I'm glad to see so many of you were able to get the book and read it because it was really good. I know I read it very quickly. It just really flowed for me. So how did you all like it? Any thoughts to begin with?
I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it's and I found a great website that I looked at the questions and they were like really all the discussion questions that came out of the publishing companies were just too long and involved questions. Like I wanted short, like let's get going questions. So I found this website that broke it up in themes, like discussing the different themes of the book. And the one of the major themes is passing.
This is below me.
And this is a book of passing. And so this is what Brit Bennett said about passing. A lot of the passing stories are often very moralizing. I didn't want to punish Stella for passing. I was mostly thinking about what does her life look like after she has made this really big dramatic choice, and also the lives of those of her family. And she goes on to talk about most books on passing are usually at the end, the person realizes they are morally wrong and something terrible happens at the end because they passed as a white person. And this book, she didn't want to do that. So what did you think of this whole passing theme?
I think it reemphasized that the book was about choices.
Good, yeah.
And the implications that choices make. And think of the choice that Reese makes. And there was, in the reviews that I read of it, there was one that criticized the whole development of Reese as a character, and that the book because all it did was talk about gay and lesbian issues. And it was like, I wanted to write that this book is about choices and the implications that choices have on not only you, but many other people around you.
On page 75, Stella said she felt queasy at how simple it was. All there was to being white was acting like you were. And she reflects on the second time she passed for white. There was nothing to
I've lost connection
except boldness. You could convince anyone you belong somewhere if you acted like you did. And then and then she says, when she tells Loretta that she's Black, if it came down to her word versus Loretta's, she would always be believed. And knowing this, she felt for the first time truly white. And that was page 201. And her transformation had been complete. So I know you were talking, Trisha, about choices, and her choice was to be white. And it took to finding out at the end just how that choice affected her. So what did you all think of that and this whole passing thing and through history. I mean, usually passing stories happen before, but this is a passing story that's took place during the 60s, right after Martin Luther King, or right before he was assassinated. It was during the 60s. So this story of passing, had you ever read anything like this, or any ideas on that?
I had not. Can you hear me or not?
Oh yeah, we hear you.
Well, I was
I guess I have a
surprised
bad connection.
about, okay. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, Jerry.
I was surprised. Okay, I was surprised about an all-white community, an all-white black community or a black-white community. I never heard of such a thing. But then I'm not familiar with the black culture too much.
Well, I taught in a high school that was probably
Yes,
a third black. And in that high school, the vice principal was a dark black person. And she talked about the privilege of the lighter skin amongst the black community. And so this, and as the different reviews I read, it's not a story about, not always a story about black versus white, or blacks in a white community, but how blacks in their own community react to one another. And I think that's what Brit Bennett was talking about, how that in your own community, and this is the lighter skin, the lighter skin seemed to be of a higher, different, caliber, that, a different, I don't know, hierarchy of blackness. And
when you speak about choices, it's interesting that Desiree picked the darkest man she could find, and then the people in Mallard had trouble accepting her daughter.
That's
being
right.
so dark skinned.
Yeah.
So the two sisters went in totally opposite directions.
That the whole, and then and she and Stella marrying a white man, and that their children look like the fathers. I mean, they don't take on really the mother's view.
Right.
And the community of Mallard is made up. I mean, there's no Mallard community, but there are Creole communities like that in Louisiana. And Brit's mom comes from Louisiana and is familiar with communities like that. That they try to get lighter and lighter their skin, so they intermarry with the other light skin. They don't go out of their community. So that is historically accurate, which I'd never heard of before. And also Brit Bennett uses a lot, speaking of this whole thing, her mom was a fingerprint expert, which in Los Angeles, and that was Desiree's job, and she was good at it, and she wanted to continue it, but there's not a demand for it, and of course, her skin coloring stopped her from pursuing that any further down in the South. In the North, she could do it, she was accepted in DC, but not in the South. But
that shows how bright both of the girls were when they were younger.
Yes.
That she could take a job like that. And then Stella went back to school and was really fantastic at math. I mean, they were very, very bright girls in terms of their paths.
Yeah, so
it just seemed to me that did everybody feel like the book was really pulled together at the end or not, the story?
Oh,
I guess I was expecting something different. I'm not sure I thoroughly enjoyed it.
yeah.
Because at the end, I just thought, oh, I was expecting something different, I guess.
And you must be onto something, Sharon, because when I was doing my research to get ready for today, there was a lot of discussion. What did you think about the ending of the book? You know,
Okay.
can you explain the ending of the book? So I'm like clicking on it. Did I miss something? And because it took part in this, it's broken up in time.
Yeah, it was a little hard to follow
Yeah.
completely. I mean, I had to concentrate, which is okay. But yeah, I guess I didn't feel as though it was all tied together real well. I don't know. That was my.
Why? I thought it was very reflective of life and of the book. And a lot of things that I read in reviews were critical of her bringing in all these varied aspects. And I thought that it was very reflective of real life and that it was very believable.
Mm-hmm.
That there aren't answers, and real life doesn't tie itself up in a nice big bow. And there aren't answers that are cut and dry in real life. And that's what this book was. And this book kept constantly pushing for me choices. And I found it very readable. I found it very believable. And I just really, thought it was a good read, and I'm glad we read it.
And I think when Stella chooses to be white, she chose to be white because she wasn't getting anywhere in getting a job being black. I mean, she could get a job, but it was not a good job. So it was like she forced herself to be white. It got to be easier, but then she lost so much from that choice. And I think
really get to be easier for her, Janine?
no, well, no,
That whole thing think of that whole thing when the walkers move in.
Yeah. No, I think that
she goes through.
it was easier for other people. Her choice she made. She never, when the walkers, yeah, she was a horrible person when the walkers moved in. And it was angry at her. Was anyone forgiving of her? I was like furious with her for.
Loretta was really her only friend in that life.
Yeah.
When they started meeting together, and she wouldn't give into it, but yet she felt at home with Loretta and comfortable with her, but she just turned her back.
Yeah.
Well, she was afraid of being discovered. That's one thing too.
Yeah.
I think it was very reflective of her ambiguity and her self-identification. She wanted to be white and put herself in that role, but obviously questioned it constantly and operated from a base of fear of being discovered. And then when she finds someone next door who's black, I think the whole ambiguity she's had throughout her life just came to play in ways that I think she was even surprised that she was as nasty as she was, and showed really how desperately she wanted to be accepted as white, and what a desperate fight that was throughout her life.
That's right.
Well,
Life was a performance. She was an actor on her own stage, and she was vanishing. Her real self was vanishing, becoming invisible. And a lot of times in the book, when they're talking about acting, that when you're on stage, and this is what Kennedy says, and you become this character, your self vanishes. You become invisible, and you become this other person. And she was on this stage, and she was losing herself, who she really was in this performance.
well, I think you know, when we talk about choices with Stella, I think she wanted an easier life. That was first and foremost. And, you know, the job she had cleaning the house and what happened there with, I mean, she felt that that was her way out, and she needed a job, and, you know, they were down to, you know, very few choices. And I think she just saw herself having a better life. And you can't fault somebody for that. I mean, doesn't everybody who, especially somebody who grew up with such extreme poverty and, you know, that whole background, wanting to improve their lot in life. I had a lot of sympathy for Stella.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
sad, it's a sad
Very difficult for
commentary,
her.
but it's a sad commentary on our society. I mean, just put it out there that
Yeah.
that's what she had to do. I mean, it cost her a lot, I think, emotionally. But
It was
Yeah.
hard for her to keep up with all of her lies, especially when Kennedy said that she knew she was lying.
right.
So she had to
But
keep that
I
persona
was-
going.
Yeah, I was sympathetic to why she did it. And sometimes when in a situation like that, people start to do something and then, you know, it's like falling down a rabbit hole. You know, it's hard to pull back. And how could she ever, you know, return to her old life? That it would have been way too difficult.
Did you think that she was going to go back to Mallard more than once? I didn't think she'd left for good. That when she came back to see her mother.
I thought she would. I thought when the grandmother died, when her mother died, I thought she would.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was one of those
I thought so.
hanging open issues that we were discussing earlier about how the book ended. You know, again, I agree with Trissa that not everything is tied up. So I was okay that it was, a lot of things were just left hanging open, because that is a reflection of how life is. You know, things don't always get resolved.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't know.
So identity and transformation is another theme throughout. And when Reese came into the story, I was like, why are they pulling in this theme now? You know, like, let's just leave it as, you know, the black passing as white theme. But then it's all about performing. You know, Stella had this performance, and now Reese, his character, she became this other character as she was leaving. And I know, Trissa, you were mentioning that people were upset. And at first I was upset until I started to read more reviews about it, about his transformation, leaving Texas and then coming to LA, and how he transformed to this person that he became. So it was really a comparison between Stella and Reese. I mean, both.
It's another choice.
And another theme of someone having to pass. You know,
Right. It's another choice that somebody makes.
Mm-hmm.
I
The
guess
thing
so.
that constantly amazes me about those choices is having the ability to make them. I mean, for Stella to know that she should do this, I'm not sure Stella was ever happy. Reese, I don't know, because we don't know enough about him. It seems that he's happy. It seems that he and Jude are going to be okay. But to have the ability, it's just really amazing. Choices are something that, again, I think is the whole theme of this book. I know I'm being repetitive, but everybody makes choices. And what about the implication of where the motivation comes from? These two twins to run away to a better life. They, as children, saw their father hung. I mean, I don't think there's anyone in this discussion that can even begin to imagine what that would be like.
Yeah.
And there's not one of us that can imagine what it would be to have to make a decision about being Black. You are. And I mean, we've learned so much about it, and this is just such a minor representation of it. I mean, this is a nice representation of it. The thought of, I'm talking too much, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I just think it's overwhelming, and I think that this book presents an easy way to discuss these overwhelming things that happen in people's lives.
Right.
Through the choices that you make.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see this as a limited series.
Or
Can't
not.
imagine. I don't know.
I don't know. I some of these, especially HBO, does a good job just to see how it goes, and if Brit Bennett has a role in the whole thing. I never understood the cover until I started to look at reviews. I just thought it was a bunch of colors. I didn't really look at it carefully. And Good Morning America took the two colors and separated it and then came back together. So there's two faces that come together and then separate. And when you see that in a animation, oh yeah, they're really identify as they were as children one, and then they grew apart to be two very different people. So the cover, did anyone say, oh, the cover is why, did you get that right away, or was it me?
I did right away. I found the book at Target and I was like, oh, this cover. I was looking at it at the stoplight on the way home. This is really interesting. So yeah, I got it right away.
And I should have looked at it closer, and I didn't until Good Morning. This was a Good Morning America read, and so a discussion. And I think it came out at an important time. It came out in 2020 when there's all this Black Lives Matter front and center. When the book started, it was Black Lives Matter of the 60s. So it's like, that's why I think it had such an appeal, because history is repeating itself in a lot of this story. Also, I know in one of the discussions, they talked about that whole Karen, that now, they say you're a Karen, that whole meme thing now. You know what I'm talking about, everyone?
Yeah.
Not exactly.
No, I'm not sure.
No,
Okay, so
Was that in the book or?
no. So
No.
In the discussion here, let me see if I can find this. So in the past summer, there was a situation with the bird watcher in Central Park, and the woman, the white woman who used her white against his black, she was superior. And so then they started to use the term Karen to refer to women who use their whiteness, their color, to get ahead. So if someone calls you a Karen, and in this book,
It's not a compliment.
No.
And it's very interesting because Whoopi Goldberg's real name is Karen.
Oh,
In a big deal out of it. She did a lot of stand-up. I saw a stand-up routine that I didn't completely understand, but now I do.
yeah. So in here, they were Brit also talked a lot about that, that, white women, that whole theme was brought up in her discussions, but now as I'm looking for it, not seeing why she was talking about it. So another part of the story that I thought we should talk about is being part of a group, identity in a group. And I think that was Stella's main problem. She never identified with anyone in her life. I think she never found a group that she was part of until she started teaching math, which is kind of like the most, it's black and white, you know, math is math. It's
Structure.
not no feeling in math, it's just math. But she never really found her place until she got an education. And back to when they were girls, the whole reason they ran away from Mallard is because they lost the ability to have an education. The mother took it away and said, you're going to have to start working to support this house, this family. I would like to see what that house looked like, because that was like the original house in the neighborhood, and they were kind of like of that group of people, they were like the class
Founding
class,
family. Yeah.
founding
Founding family. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And that to keep that home and to keep that just to keep that house going. And I loved let's talk about characters, because I want to speak about Early. I loved
Yeah.
I loved Early.
the private eye. What do you call them when they're looking for
Bounty hunter. Bounty hunter.
bounty hunter?
Yeah.
But think about how his life starts.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any one of us that can imagine you're given away because there are too many of you.
Yeah.
And obviously that has an impression on him. I mean, things that happen to you in your childhood are so much more important than we ever realized.
Mm-hmm.
And then he, steals cars and he goes to prison, and that's how he becomes a bounty hunter, because he hangs out with people that do that. But he basically, I think, was really likable and a really good guy.
Yeah. And he protected Desiree. I love their relationship. They never got married, right? I don't think they ever got married. And
No, they didn't.
No.
and then even his relationship with the mother, he was like, became part of the family and protected that family. And it became Jude's dad, and just
He was a great character. He was.
great.
But did the mom not like him? Like him?
No, she didn't. He was.
No,
good.
not
She
at all.
didn't. Yeah, she didn't like him, but he was just like
But as a
unwavering
hotel
respect.
summer, she goes fishing with him.
Yeah.
I mean,
But in the beginning, she didn't like him at all. But I think at the end, she did.
Yeah.
yeah, she didn't
Well,
know.
she didn't think that he was good enough for her daughter,
Right.
because he was a farmhand. So, again,
Yeah.
it talks about
But
the
Maureen,
different.
don't you find that interesting that the same woman that doesn't find a farmhand worthy of her daughter, when her daughter was 16, her daughter wasn't worthy of going to school. Her daughter
Right.
become a maid in a house. I mean, again, nothing is ever tied up with a big bow. It's a choice. Why does Adele, the mother, make the choice that her daughters, who both are bright, doing well, should stop going to school? Why does she make that decision? Why does she make that choice? Is it because it's what happened to her? She has no vision? But yet when it comes to mating, one of her daughters finding a mate, the guy's really good. He takes care of her. He shows up. He's good to everybody. But because he's an ex-farmhand, he's not good enough.
And he's darker. I
He's
think
darker.
Right.
he's prejudiced.
So,
Well, it's, I think there, there's evidently a subclass, that even, if within, like we were talking before about lighter skinned blacks being in the hierarchy, a higher perception in terms of how they're treated and seen in the community. Farmhands, these were transient people, and they were, the low class.
I still have a real problem with the mother. It's okay for her kids to go to work as maids.
Right.
Yeah.
But so you unravel that a little bit, and
good word.
You look at why she was in that situation, because her husband was dragged out and killed by white men, and how traumatizing that was. And then how that evolved into the mother not having any choices. She needed money. So you're right, she did not have vision, but in that period of time in the early 60s, well, actually that was probably in the 50s, right? When they were 16.
Oh, I think it was in the 60s. I don't know. It started like 68.
Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated when she was living in DC. So
DC, yeah. So
right.
she was 16.
That's 68. Okay.
Yeah. So, I'm just trying to, in my mind, do the timeline and what were the societal factors surrounding all of that in the 50s. I mean, you didn't share the same water fountain, especially in the South. So, it's all of those different factors that we look back on it now, and it's pretty amazing. Yet the undercurrent of I'm sorry?
I was going to say, with Early's job, even when he was courting Desiree, he'd be gone for 2 or 3 weeks, and then he'd show up again, and then he'd go off again. He was not a constant presence, and I think that would have also put a mother kind of off of him as a potential mate. Couldn't count on him being there from Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
Right. Especially at that point in history. Where is he going? Remember at one point she said, he probably has a woman in every port or something like that.
That's
so,
right. She thought that.
Yeah. So to her, she was.
What do you think of the character of Kennedy? What do you think her role in this is?
So let's see, Kennedy. Yeah. And the only thing good that her mother saw in her was her ability to act. The only time she ever
Linda, are you okay?
Looked like she dropped her device.
Yeah, I know, but did she drop her device or did she drop herself? And don't you think we have to ask? I mean, I don't know.
There she is.
Thank you.
I had to change rooms. I'm good.
Okay, we just wanted to make sure you're all right. Sorry. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. About Kennedy.
So Kennedy, only time the mother ever complimented Kennedy was when she was in the play, and she was a Chinese railroad worker. And her mother said, "Wow, you were so good." She helped her memorize her lines. And when Kennedy thinks of her mother, that's the only time she ever complimented her. She only found bad things about her, she thought. And the only time she ever complimented her was her acting. And she really wasn't that good of an actress. But she didn't, it was Kennedy felt like a entitled child,
Felt like she was, for heaven's sakes.
I don't need to go to college. I'm just going to become an actress. And that she actually did become an actress. I was amazed at that she was really, to me, a mediocre kind of actor, and she ends up being.
That's only in fiction. It doesn't happen in real life. I have a granddaughter who's trying to break into the acting business, and it's a very tough situation. Very
Well,
tough.
she doesn't. It isn't like she becomes the next Meryl
Yeah,
Streep.
famous.
She's in a third-rate soap opera that isn't very
Yeah.
and she's in off Broadway stuff that isn't very good. And she doesn't stick with it. But it allows coincidences in the novel, in the narrative, for her to run into Jude. And that allows that coming together of that generation.
And the whole thing of acting.
Yeah, and it in my opinion, it reemphasizes that the whole thing, that everything in this book is about performance. Kennedy's just the most visible, and she's not very successful at it. Are the rest of them successful? Or is
They don't seem like they could get their act together. You know, it just seemed like they struggle through the whole process.
well, I think I
And
would.
it's probably life, but
I think, yeah, I agree with you that they struggle, but constantly knowing that you're a fake every day, that you're trying to be something you aren't.
right. But I think that's hard. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know the real process or the real, you know, like why, why?
Well, in comparison, when you're talking about versus Reese,
yeah.
does a transgender person really, is it an act all the time, like it was for Stella? Is that going on in this book? I don't know.
Yeah, but I guess Reese, that's I think that's kind of like another story. You know,
It's
that's
another act. It's another choice.
yeah.
It's part of the book.
It's like Barry.
In some cases, it isn't a choice.
What was that? It isn't his
I
choice.
just said in some cases no, it's not a choice to be transgender. It's something you feel. It's hard to make that transition, but it's not a choice.
It's hard to make the choice to be honest about it.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the character Barry is the only one that's able to do two. He's able to do the two things. He could be a high school science teacher by day, a drag queen by night. And the whole, I thought that was so funny that that's their friends. What an eclectic group of people to be hanging with as a college student. And yeah, Barry's the only one who is successful at.
Reese is successful. Reese goes to New York and has surgery. That's how they run into Kennedy when she's doing off Broadway.
No, Reese becomes himself. He completely transforms. His other self vanishes.
But isn't that successful in transgender?
Well, yeah, but Barry has got the. Yeah, I guess you're right. But Barry's an interesting character. I mean, did they need to have that all in there?
Why not? I mean, I don't have a problem with it.
No, I mean, it was to me, I started thinking about the whole performance, the whole
Again, it's an example of performance.
He's performing. He's a drag queen. And yes, that it brings in more themes. I mean, this book has a lot of literary themes going on. And when I saw, I said, it's so much better to talk about the themes throughout. And so Kennedy, in the end, is a realtor.
Yeah.
Which are performers. Think about it, a realtor.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very true. Yeah.
It's all about performance. And I thought when it ended with her being a realtor, I was like, whoa. That is
I agree.
Yeah.
Opening the door and welcoming them in. It's like a plan.
Yes. Let's see.
What about Jude?
Jude, she was one of my favorite characters. I really liked her.
I don't think she was a performer.
No,
I think she lived her life, but
yeah.
she felt very uncomfortable when she went to LA. So Barry's whole group was accepting of her easily.
And Brit Bennett got her undergraduate in English in Stanford. And then she got her her MFA in Michigan, and she hated being in Michigan because it was so cold. And I thought she got the Minnesota being so cold, so accurate. Because I was reading her descriptions of, and she couldn't stand the whole Michigan weather thing. And so a little bit of herself keeps showing up in her books. You know, her mother being the fingerprint, and then the weather thing, and then the story ending in L.A.
Well, she's from California.
Yeah, she's from California.
She's from Santa Monica or San Diego. I don't, one of the
near LA somewhere. Yeah.
Which brings up something I'd like to just throw out. California is a place unto itself, and it's a melting pot. If you refer to the United States as a melting pot, California is a melting pot of its own. And what comes to mind about Black people coming from California, Jackie Robinson was from California. And when he first breaks into the major leagues in the East Coast, he has an incredibly hard time being treated so second class because it was different in California. And they encourage his wife, who turns out to be a brilliant nurse, and she goes on to a brilliant teaching career in nursing. And I think at Yale, I'm not sure, but some East Coast school. But at any rate, they find coming to the East Coast very difficult and very different from being in California. And I think that there's something about California acceptance. There's just something about it. And in one of the reviews I read, that the author talks about how California is a different place. And I was reminded of this to Jackie Robinson. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, California in this story is more accepting of.
And it's where Jude goes. It's where the author has Jude go. And Jude is probably one of the most conflicted people in the book, because she gets plopped back in Mallard for her own protection. Her mother brings her there to protect her from an abusive father, or at least the father was abusive to the mother. And she gets plopped in this situation, and she's bullied, and she's never really accepted. And she can't wait to go to California, which she jumps into this very strange world of transgenders. And
one of the things I think was very refreshing about Jude, and she was one of my favorites too, Janine, is that she figured out how to use something she was adept at and use that as her springboard with her athleticism. And that was how it was USC she got into, right? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
UCLA.
UCLA, okay, and it was
Yeah.
one of the
Right.
California, and I thought that was one of the more positive characterizations as she sought to develop herself and find freedom. She was genuine. She wasn't acting out a role. Yes, she kind of connected with some goofy people, but she connected with that. That was a good thing.
Yeah.
And it was because of her strength as an athlete that she broke out of the chains. And I thought she was a very genuine character.
yeah.
And I thought she was one of the more positive and hope-inducing characters in the book.
That's right. I think so too. Yeah, she
was the normal one. It seemed to me.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that she turned all of the negativity that she felt coming into her as a person while she was growing up in Mallard. And obviously she had her mother's support, but she was able to turn that around and find something she excelled at to get out of Dodge. And she did it successfully, I thought.
Yeah.
So I was kind of proud of her.
Yeah. Yeah.
I became very attached to her as well, rooting for her and
She
hoping
could be
she
a
would get into
doctor.
medical school.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. She is a good character. And one last theme that we could talk about is trauma. And we inherit trauma. This was from an interview from Brit. She said, we inherit trauma from our parents that we don't have context for understanding. So the girls inherited, well, they saw trauma. And then, do you see that statement? Desiree and Stella witnessed the attempted murder of their father, who was then later killed by the same murderer. Stella is physically abused by a white man whose home she cleans, and she never tells anyone. The abuse her father heaped on her mother. Jude witnesses the abuse her father heaped on her mother. So this whole trauma and how it's seen in each of the characters is also a theme. As a child, Kennedy has nightmares that she never remembers. And when she tells Jude as an adult, she says, that's the thing I could never remember. But when I started acting, they stopped. It was the strangest thing. Like there was something bad inside me trying to get out, and I could only get rid of it here. So the trauma that Stella was experienced somehow went into Kennedy. I don't know, but trauma is a theme throughout that is in all of the characters. They're holding in that trauma of the past generation. Anyone that whole idea of Kennedy becoming an actress and then losing her nightmares, did that resonate with anyone?
She always felt her mother was not telling her the truth when she was a child. She always felt that mother was lying to her about everything, and that's probably her trauma, where she got her nightmares from. But then you grow up and you,
Yeah.
pardon me? Yeah.
She felt something. Yeah.
She escaped from that then when she got better, you know.
Mm-hmm. And the whole, at the end, the whole tying of the story together is the photo of the funeral of the two little girls in their black dresses. Mm-hmm. And this photo really kind of ties the story together. All the different loose ends. Jude has this picture and she finally shows her. And I don't know. I think that picture was an important part of the story. Any other ideas about that? Do you feel like you've inherited some of your parents' traumas, or?
For sure.
I think so too.
My mom died at a very early age, and my father was great, but still, here I am. And my daughter will say, Mom, you just have never really gotten over that. Well, I guess I haven't. That was pretty traumatic.
Yeah.
As an 8-year-old girl, and I had older brothers and sisters, but yeah, that was trauma. That was, it took me a long time to stop crying about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still do.
And sometimes we don't even understand what that trauma is that we have, but we know that something isn't feeling right.
Yeah, it's like a worry or something.
Yeah.
Back there.
Yeah. Well,
do you think that?
Oh,
well, in today's world, do you think that people of the Negro race still want to become white?
No.
Or now, it's not important now.
No, I think it's the way you're raised. If you're raised in a home that, and it's all of us, how we're raised by our parents. And I see my grandchildren being raised by my son is, they don't see color as my parents saw color. I felt, I couldn't understand at the time that it was happening, but I knew that they were very prejudiced. But I think now, and even in a Black family, how that child is raised. And I think if you listen to any of these, or you read these books, and I think it's all, and you listen to these authors now that have been writing like about white fragility, and there's so many authors now that have come out, and there's books about children's books that bring out, and for story time on Friday, I didn't want to do Black history. I wanted to do, because this is story time, but all my stories are about the Black princess and the hair, and so I think it's the way what you do. Like I have this one patron who checks out the books that this little kid, this 2-year-old, is reading about all different races, about all different religions. And I think, wow, that kid is seeing all different viewpoints, and will hopefully not see color. But I think we all see color, right? I know I do as an adult. And I was at that high school, and I always said, well, I don't see color, because I didn't want to feel like I was being prejudiced. And but yes, I did see color. And
Can I make a comment?
yeah.
I want to make a comment about my growing up. I was born and raised in Green Bay. And at the time, back in the 50s, early 60s, the only Black men you saw in Green Bay were packers, and they were esteemed. Everybody looked up to the Black men in the community. That's changed as there's been more influx of normal people besides athletes, but it's kind of what you're used to or what you see.
But don't you think in a lot of ways that was beneficial in the process of educating white people, and that in its own way had an effect that
Definitely. Absolutely.
has been far-reaching, that we don't really understand? I grew up down the road in Menasha, and they were rock stars. They were important.
I think it helped educate Green Bay. I mean, just
Yeah, and Wisconsin. And
sure, the whole area, right?
But
I think this book, I think one of the things that attracted me to this book is that it caused me to consider the subtleties of racism, that not so, well, from two sides. As being a white person, I have to confront my racism, the subtleties of racism in my life, because it's there, whether I want to admit it or not. And I think also there are the levels. There's like the caste system of Blackness, and the status of whether you're dark Black or light Black, and also against other lower class white people, as that wasn't as evident so much in this book. I was reading another book. It isn't because it's Black. I heard someone say it's not Black History Month, it's Black History Year, because we need to be more conscious of how we are prejudiced all year long, not just a month, and know more about how and what Black people have experienced. But I started out another book that was just printed, and it caught my eye more by the author's name. It was in a book review that I read. Her last name was my last name at one time, Johnson. The author was Nancy Johnson. It's also written and takes place part of the time, just a very short period of time in Chicago, but it's called The Kindest Lie. And it's about a Black woman who gave up her, she became pregnant her senior year in high school. And her baby she gave her baby up to adoption. But it's a very interesting book too, because it's part of its discussion and part of its theme is the subtleties of racism that we experience either as white people or the Black people who are the victims. And I just think that I'm not one to sit down and read a book about Black history or read a book about a nonfiction book about racism and how it affects our daily lives. I don't like to read nonfiction books. I like to escape when I read, but I just thought this book, the book we're discussing, also challenges us to think more about where do we experience that racism in our own lives. And we're sort of in a little cloud up here in the county, and we don't experience it on a daily basis, but we do need to think more about it. I think that was an important underlying theme of this book. I don't know, did you see that, Janine, or am I superimposing it onto the book?
No, I think it's yes. That's an important theme throughout the whole book. Yeah, the different levels of racism. Of course, yes, I saw that. And that brings us to our next book, which Nancy, I
Wait
know
till you start reading that one. Wait till you start reading that one. Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. So our next two books, and again, these we chose before our BG passed away. You have a choice between Notorious RGB and RBG, I'm sorry, and She Came to Slay, which is the Harriet Tubman book. And these two books are biographies. They're not memoirs, they're biographies. So they're written by someone else. They're nonfiction. And of course, they're going to read totally different. You've already started, Jerry?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. It's fascinating, really.
Which one?
Really.
Which one?
Harriet Tubman. Harriet
one I was
Tubman.
reading.
I never knew. Yeah, Harriet Tubman. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we've heard
Why
about. They
did
just
you,
had that.
Janine, why did you pick Harriet Tubman and Ruth Bader Ginsburg as?
All right, so here's how I chose those two books. So one of our members, Nancy, who's not here today, Thanert, sent me the Chicago Tribune's recommended book list for book clubs. And they had a list of history books, and they had She Came to Slay on it. So there's nothing written about this. So I went online and I looked up the book, and there was a Good Morning America interview of the author. And she said the book was written in the style of Notorious RBG. And so I took both of those books, and they're both visually nice looking books, and they read the same. And so I thought, well, that would be nice. We would have a choice, because when you're talking about history, it's not like Vanishing Half where there's a story to it. This is history, is what happened. So the book, She Came to Slay, we have at the library. We also have Notorious RBG. Notorious RBG is also an audio book and an ebook on Hoopla Digital. It's
But not She Came to Slay?
Pardon me?
Sorry, is not She Came to Slay?
No, that one is just the book. There's no ebook format or anything. So She Came to Slay, you're going to have to read the book, but they're available at libraries because It is not a popular book at all. So Jerry's finding it fascinating. I'm hoping, after listening to the author, I thought, wow, this sounds like a really good book.
Well, they're
And
both such powerful women.
yeah,
Both had such an influence. I mean, you were talking about February's Black History Month and that we should do it all year. Well, the upcoming month is Women's History Month, and that's another one that should be done all year.
and that's why we're doing it. So I thought, well, that kind of flows with. I chose
But these two books, in my mind, are proof in the pudding that there's been powerful women forever. That just
Are we reading both of them?
You can read both. You can read one. I'm going to read
Okay.
both.
Okay.
The only problem with searching for a notorious RBG on Hoopla Digital, it doesn't come up. When you put the title in, you have to put the author's name and it'll come up.
No.
So just put Ina Karman, I think is her name. Iron Karnan is her name, Carmen, and it'll come right up.
Okay.
I put that in the email, and so you can either listen to it or read it, and that's on Hoopla Digital. So those are our books for next month.
I have a housekeeping question.
Sure.
Is anyone else having trouble connecting with Zoom? This is the only Zoom meeting that it only took me 3 tries to get on.
Ooh.
And I've listened to Zoom's help. I've called Zoom and they tell me that there's nothing wrong with my connection. But I belong to 2 other book clubs and I couldn't get on another book club's connection.
Wouldn't it be more?
Sometimes it's also, it could be where the Zoom is originating. I mean, we have a pretty strong connection here. I don't know, maybe it's the person who's hosting the Zoom. I don't know.
Okay.
Or your personal Wi-Fi. I mean, your personal, your home. I've had it kind of come in and out today where the connection was bad. But so I think it's more.
Well, I had trouble. It took me 3 tries to get in, but I now know what I'm supposed to, I now have a whole sequence of things that I do to get there. And I really didn't
Well, very good. I have got to run. It's been good.
Okay. Well, thank you. I just wanted to ask if anyone else was having trouble.
No. And I want to say one thing about Zoom. If you ever have problems, just call the number. It's a 312 Chicago area code. You can use just your phone. We just won't see your face, but I Zoom by phone in my car.
Okay, that's what that number is. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
And they'll ask you for the meeting ID. And so that's make sure you have the meeting ID available. But
is that big long number that you click?
Yes. But
okay, all right, just so we know what it is.
I Zoom in my car for a class that I attend because it's usually when I'm in the car. And I have no problem with it. I don't talk as much because I can't see people's faces, but I can hear, and I like that. So it's just an option if you're having trouble.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's advice.
Okay, everyone. Have a good one.
Nice
We'll
to
see you
see you.
again.
Have a
all right.
good
Thanks
one.
for
Bye, thanks.
Bye. Bye-bye.